When President Obama got elected and then appointed me as director of the CIA, I can remember meeting with him in the Oval Office at the White House. And the president said to me, "Your most important mission is to go after Osama bin Laden." I went ahead, established a task force, appointed people to do nothing else but go after bin Laden and to report to me every week as to what was happening. And I remember meeting with them, and sometimes they'd say, "Well, we don't have any new evidence." And I said, "You know what? That's not good enough. That's not good enough. If you don't have any new evidence, I want you to give me 5 or 10 new ideas about how you do that." And to their credit, they did. When we finally got a breakthrough with finding who the couriers were to bin Laden and putting a face to those couriers and then locating those couriers and following them to a compound in Abbottabad and looking at that compound, which was 3 times the size of other compounds, had 18-foot walls on one side, 12-foot walls on the other side, we suddenly realized that this could very well be the location of bin Laden. That moment was something I'll never forget, because you can imagine 10 years of frustration, 10 years of dead ends, 10 years of not knowing where bin Laden was. To suddenly have that moment where you saw a compound, you saw a mysterious family living on the 3rd floor, and you're dealing with the couriers to bin Laden, you're suddenly saying to yourself, this could be the break that we've been looking for over 10 years. This was a big risk, make no mistake about it. It was a risky mission. We never had 100% information on the location of bin Laden. We were able to see this individual who would walk in circles and go quickly back in. We pieced intelligence together, but we never knew for a fact that bin Laden was there. We put a lot of evidence together. And to suddenly have a mission where we're going to take 2 teams of SEALs 150 miles into Pakistan without telling the Pakistanis, go in, rappel down, go after that person, bin Laden, that we think is there. That's a lot of risk. We could be at war in Pakistan. We could get stuck in a combat mission on the ground. I mean, it was a very risky mission. But I remember saying to the president, when he asked me for my opinion, I said, "You know, Mr. President, I used to have an old formula I used when I was in Congress, faced a tough decision. Pretend I'm asking an average citizen of my district, if you knew what I knew, what would you do?" And I said, if the average citizen of my district knew that we had the best evidence on the location of Osama bin Laden since Tora Bora, I think they would say, you got to go in. And that's what I'm telling you, Mr. President. I think you got to go in. The next morning, I got a call from the National Security Advisor, and he said, the president's made the decision to go. And I have to say, that's probably one of the gutsiest decisions that a president can make, but he made the right decision. There was a Situation Room at the White House, and I was actually located at the headquarters of CIA, because we were actually running the mission from an operations center at the CIA. We had drones looking at not only the helicopters going in, but over the compound. We were feeding all of that to the Situation Room where the president was located. The moment a helicopter stalled, because it had been hot that day and the heat came up and stalled one of the engines of the helicopter, and we saw that helicopter go down, that was a moment that I will never forget, because it's that moment where your stomach is suddenly in your mouth and you're thinking, boy, this is not going well. And I remember talking to Bill McRaven, who was heading the mission up in Afghanistan. And I said, "Bill, what the hell is going on?" And he didn't miss a beat. He said, "Don't worry, I've got a backup helicopter coming in. We're going to breach through the walls. We're going to continue with the mission. And I remember saying to him and myself, God bless you, let's do it. When Special Forces and Bill McRaven went on with the mission and they breached through the walls, we could hear gunfire, so we knew something was going on. And then there was 20 minutes of silence, longest 20 minutes of my life. And at the end of that 20 minutes, Bill McRaven came back on and said, I think we have a Geronimo, which was the code word for finding bin Laden. And a few minutes later, he came back on and said, we have a Geronimo, which means we got bin Laden. I can't tell you the feeling that I had at that moment in time, because it was as if everything we had planned and worked on was now being fulfilled, and bin Laden was being brought to justice. I can remember going to the White House after the president's announcement, and we were walking away from the ceremony, and people had gathered at Lafayette Park and on the east side of the White House. And the crowds were yelling, USA, USA, CIA, CIA. And I thought I would never hear the American people all shouting, CIA, CIA. It was a great moment of pride. Obviously, when the mission is accomplished, that's a great moment. But when the President of the United States looks at you and says, thank you for accomplishing that mission, that is probably, as an American, as the son of immigrants, is probably one of the best moments in my life. To be able to find bin Laden, to go after him, and to accomplish that mission is probably the greatest way we could pay tribute to the victims of 9/11 and bring justice not just to our country, but to them.